Incredibly, all matters considered, we've actually managed to reach the 100th episode of Lancashire Footnotes. So we thought we'd do something special to celebrate, such as bake a big Eccles cake with 100 candles on it, or have multiple returning doctors or something. Then we thought, sod it, we can't be bothered, so we just went back to Ribchester instead to cover some of the bits and pieces that we missed the first time around. Let's kick off with a bit of folklore. On the outskirts of Ribchester lies the written stone, which is basically just a big slab of stone carved with the words,
Ralph Radcliffe laid this stone to lie forever, AD 1655.
According to the legend behind it, the victim of a horrible murder cursed the entire Radcliffe family because they were the ones what done it. And soon, various members of said family started to drop dead under mysterious circumstances. Understandably perhaps, Mr. Radcliffe had the written stone carved in the hopes of laying the vengeful spirit to rest. It didn't work. Shortly afterwards, travellers along the appropriately named Boggart Lane reported loud screeches and apparitions in the Stones neighbourhood. Years later, when the Radcliffes had buggered off, the farm's new tenant decided to shift the written stone into his dairy for purposes that history doesn't record. It took 6 horses and several locals to transport it, most of whom, predictably, were injured en route. Once in its new home, however, most of the stuff placed on it fell off again. You can't help thinking that it might just have been stuffed in at an awkward angle or something. Overnight, loud bangs were heard all over the farm. The next morning, the farmer called back the 6 horses and several locals to help him replace the stone in its original location. Eerily, this time only 1 horse was required. We didn't hear any weird noises when we took a look at the written stone for ourselves, other than the usual creaking of Jeanie McIntosh's knees. So we went to St Wilfrid's Grade 1 listed church in Ribchester, because the last time we were here, a couple of years ago, we didn't get a chance to explore it properly. St Wilfrid's is an old church. It dates from the 13th century and is built over the top of the Roman vicus. However, you'll be pleased to learn it isn't terribly exciting. Nonetheless, we're going to tell you about it in some detail, so buckle up. The chapel and porch were added in the 14th century, the tower was added in the 15th century, and the roof was shunted up higher, presumably to let the hot air rise, in the 16th century. The font, yes, we did warn you this was going to be detailed and dull, is a octagonal sandstone buttressed font dating from the 14th century. The oak pulpit dates from 1636. There's a wall painting of St Christopher, allegedly, although, to be honest, it could be anybody, from the 14th century. There's a twin bowl piscina up at the pointed end, stop me when you've had enough, and a vicar's board dating back to God only knows when, where the first entry is somebody called Drogo, who was probably a hobbit with a name like that. No, seriously, stop me anytime. In 1736, the balcony was added, using reworked Roman Tuscany columns, probably from the remains of the Roman fort. The north wall has a chamfered squint, which the viewer will also probably have by the end of this film, and a blocked Norman doorway. Beyond that, outside, there's the usual Grade 2 listed 17th century sundial in the churchyard, which stands on steps that probably date from the 13th century. The oldest dated gravestone in the churchyard is from 1696. I'm having difficulty staying awake here. There's lots of other stuff as well, but let's move quickly on with the help of some whisky. We escaped via the rectory gates, or whatever the building was, and headed off to the Roman baths. Not quite as impressive as Bath's Roman baths, but worth a gander nonetheless. The Roman bathhouse at Bremeton-Arkham, try saying that after a few pints, was built circa AD 100, outside the fort in case the complicated heating system caused a fire. Much the same reason why toilets in Lancashire were kept in a garden shed in the 1950s. Oddly enough, having studied the diagram that the Romans had helpfully put up on a pole for unwashed visitors, There didn't appear to be any of these said toilets on site. I'll leave that one hanging. In-house services at the bathhouse included attendants scraping the sweat off soldiers' bodies and cold plunge baths. Given the obvious lack of roof and walls, I suspect they were bloody freezing. There's an equally knackered and indecipherable ruin behind the graveyard of St. Wilfrid's, once the Roman granary, where the Roman soldiers originally stored their grain, of course. Inspired by our newfound knowledge, and because the cold was turning my nose blue outside, we decided to pay £4 and have a wander around Ribchester Museum. It's not a bad little museum, although you might want to read the information boards quite slowly if you want to get your £4 worth. The operative word in that opening gambit being little. If you're of an adipose constitution, you might want to reconsider a visit or grease yourself up in advance. Little it might be, but it's packed to the brim with ancient curios excavated from around Ribchester village, such as the Bronze Age burial urn unearthed near the car park, which makes a change from a humpback king, similar to those discovered at the now completely buggered Bleasdale Circle. There's a replica of the famous Ribchester helmet apparently being microwaved, a selection of querns, some stone balls — tennis was far more dangerous back in Roman times — broken morteriums, sweaty sandals, fractured combs, broken Samian ware, plinths and capitals balanced on thin metal tubes, carved altars, a cavalry soldier's gravestone, a cuddly toy, and some amusing phallic-shaped brooches for those of a more lavatorial sense of humour. Given that we dug up practically identical stuff at Bourne Hill in Thornton long before we handed it over to Oxford Archaeology North, none of this was new to us, and we'd already seen Romano-British remains in the wild rather than in glass cages. But it was still quite interesting, and passed about 10 expensive minutes before we retired to the gift shop and purchased a novelty Flying Willy shaped pencil rubber, possibly. After a brief visit to the gents, we headed off to stare at Parlick Fell and contemplate our 200th episode. So that's that. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and ring the old notification bell and stuff, and hopefully we'll be back again soon.